Hello, welcome everyone to the Inspired Messenger Show. I am your host, Mark Porteous. And I believe that we all choose this life for a reason, and aligning with your purpose is truly the most exciting and rewarding adventure you can imagine. This entire series is really designed to inspire, educate, and motivate you to recognize and share your own divine gifts with the world. We share information, resources, and action steps that you can take now to improve your personal and professional life so you can better fulfill your mission. And you can watch previous episodes and find other helpful resources to support your journey at inspiredmessengersnetwork.com. I feel incredibly blessed to work with these amazing mentors and teachers who are aligned with my mission to empower inspired messengers and soul-driven entrepreneurs with the tools and support they need to thrive in their purpose of transforming lives. It's a great honor to introduce my mentors and colleagues to you so we can all benefit from their wisdom and sharing. And one of the most powerful ways to share your message is through speaking. And public speaking, as you may be able to relate, also happens to be one of the biggest fears for most people. Our guest today is going to share a simple tool to make it a lot easier for you and more engaging for your audience so that it's much more effective. Ellen Finkelstein is committed to helping online business owners, such as coaches, consultants, speakers, and authors, achieve financial success while they help make the world a better place. She's passionate about guiding her clients to the right marketing strategy through the maze of technology options and into a plan of action they can actually implement. One of the techniques that Ellen believes is most empowering is speaking, like we had just discussed. And the way to reach the most people is to speak via webinar. Ellen has been doing webinars since 2007. And over the years, Ellen's expertise has led to a number of achievements, including PowerPoint MVP, a Microsoft award given to only 13 people in the United States, 11 published books, 25 different editions for McGraw-Hill and Wiley, and 9 ebooks during her 20-year career as an author. And some of her books were bestsellers in their category for years. Also, she is a NAMS, a Novice to Advanced Marketing System Instructor, and outstanding presentation workshop webinar series leader for 6 years with over 4,000 registrants. Also, training magazine webinars with over 2,500 people registering. And she's also an adjunct faculty member at the Maharishi University of Management, where she taught internet marketing at the MBA level. So she knows her stuff, and she's willing to share it with all of you. And I think it'll really make a big difference in helping you to get your message out there in a bigger way. And I'm really excited to be able to implement some of these things myself. I've been following Ellen's work for a few years now, and I love that she helps entrepreneurs change the world by helping them to market their message more effectively. So it is my pleasure to welcome Ellen Finkelstein. Hello, Ellen.
Thank you. Hi, and thank you very much for having me.
And Ellen, it's so funny. We've talked a couple times, and I didn't even ask you to pronounce your name correctly. Was that close?
Steve, I don't even remember what you. It's Stein.
Stein. Okay, Finkelstein.
But you should know that that's not necessarily the right way, because many people with that last name pronounce it Stein. That's just the way my husband's parents pronounced it.
Yep, that's kind of what I went with. So that's perfect. So, Ellen, again, welcome. I'm really glad that you're here. It was fun being on your show, and now I'm really excited to focus on your expertise about webinars. Before we jump into the kind of the meat of the conversation, can you tell us a little bit more about what you do, how you help people, and basically how you got on the path that led you here?
Well, I guess it's a long story, but I was in Iowa. My husband was on faculty, that same Maharishi University of Management, where I'm adjunct faculty. And when I was started, I had 2 little kids, 6 months and 2 years. And so I needed to do something at home. And I started doing some computer training locally. And then I had the opportunity to do some technical editing. And that eventually transitioned into writing my first book for Wiley. And it was called AutoCAD for Dummies Quick Reference or something like that. And that turned into another AutoCAD book and another AutoCAD book. And then that turned into a PowerPoint book. And that was how I got involved with PowerPoint. And I've written several books on PowerPoint over the years. But I always did it online. I like to show people sometimes a map of where I live, which is Fairfield, Iowa. So it's 4.5 hours from Chicago, 4.5 hours from Minneapolis, 4.5 hours from Omaha, and 4.5 hours from St. Louis. So it's not near anything. And so I really needed to work online, partly because I had these small children and partly because of the location. And so I started doing everything I did online. And I had my first website in 1999, which was ellenfinkelstein.com. And then a few years ago, locally, I taught a live class in my home for people on how to start an online business. And I created changetheworldmarketing.com as a vehicle to create a website and show them what I was doing as I was doing it. And I just realized how much I knew about it and how much I loved it. And so that became a second business, changetheworldmarketing.com.
And that's how it all started. I love the fact that you started because you needed to work online. For me, one of the things that I'm looking for in my business, and I think a lot of my clients and audience are also, is that freedom that you can work from anywhere in the world, and doesn't matter if you're 4.5 hours from nowhere.
Right. And what's so cool about it is I started because I had young children at home, that online business. But now that they're grown up, they're 27 and 29, I can do that same business anywhere. I can leave my home. That same business gives you the opportunity to either work in your house if you need to stay at home, or to travel anywhere.
Yep. And so you got the flexibility of location, and two, the flexibility of time, where you can do your webinars and your presentations to fit your schedule.
Right, absolutely. And one of the things that's so cool about webinars is that you can do them when you want. We're doing this one in the middle of the day, and maybe not everybody can attend it live. So you can record this. You're using Google Hangouts on air. It gets recorded, and then people can watch the recording. So it gives freedom of time not only to the presenter, but also to the attendees.
Right. I didn't even think about that extra flexibility on the other side, being able to be heard. So yeah, if you're trying to reach your audience, that's another very difficult thing, is trying to get everybody together in one place at one time. This gives the audience flexibility as well. Great point. Right. So one of the things you say is that you think speaking is the most powerful way, even more than writing. Why is that? Why do you feel like speaking is a more powerful way to share your message than writing?
Well, first of all, it's an ancient thing. You read stories about people speaking in Rome, friends, Romans, countrymen, because not everyone could read at that time. And so people spoke. And I sometimes talk about webinars as being something as big an invention as Gutenberg's inventing the printing press or the internet, where people could write blogs and publish all over the world. But speaking is just it's so much more like being in person with somebody. Now, we're doing this online, but first of all, you can speak also in person. And so there's the visual component, there's the audio component. It's so much more visceral, I guess you could say, than just reading text, which you can't convey emotion nearly as well. You don't know what expression people have. And so it's just much more like real life than just writing. Not that writing isn't powerful, it is, but speaking I think is even more powerful. And we'll talk a little bit more about the difference between speaking live and speaking online, but that's another thing. Yeah.
Well, just the speaking and writing thing, it brought up another point for me about being visible. Like that's a lot of the theme for this year, is being seen. And it's really easy to hide behind a book or emails or whatever else, but to actually get out there and be seen really helps to build that deeper connection. So I can totally feel what you're saying.
Absolutely. And with webinars, sometimes people hide behind their slides. And so that's why what we're doing now, where people are seeing us, they can see our faces, is so much nicer. And, on my webinar series, I use Zoom, where you can do a combination of screen sharing and webcam. And so people can see you and see your emotions. You can see my hands moving around like this. I can convey that so much better than right behind hiding behind a blog post or some kind of writing. Yeah.
Well, that's a really interesting point. For anybody who speaks with their hands, they can really relate to what you're saying about being able to communicate visually from that. It also reminded me that we are going to be doing some screen sharing here at the end to kind of demonstrate your point. One, about being able to screen share, but two, to share some of the work that you've done with your slides. And three, that'll also give them a special code to get in and get a free bonus gift from you that'll really help them out with their next webinar presentation.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. So you said you've been doing this since 2007.
Webinars. Yes.
But you've been doing PowerPoint really since the turn of the millennia.
My first book on PowerPoint was on called I don't remember what it was called, but it was on PowerPoint 95. So that was 1995. Wow. So a long time ago. Yeah, I've been using PowerPoint for a really long time, and I've been teaching. I've taught thousands of people different skills about how to present. A lot of it focused on the slides. And one of the things I teach, because I'm not a designer and I went through this whole traumatic experience of finding out that my slides were really bad, was this system that I've created to help people design slides even if they're what I call artistically challenged. And so I help people do that. People need to communicate, and slides are really helpful when you have information to communicate, but they need to be engaging, they need to be powerful, and they need to be visual.
And you had mentioned that you went through some things yourself to find out that your slides were not everything that they are today. And I know we're going to kind of go over the three big mistakes that people often make with their slides. I also...
I'm happy to share that story if you want.
Sure.
You want me to share that story? Sure. So at that time, and it was 1990, it was 2004. And I was writing a quarterly article in a magazine called Presentations Magazine, doesn't exist anymore, print magazine, physical print magazine. And I wrote an article called Presentations Without Bullets, in this case meaning, it was kind of a double entendre because, you know, the little dots when you have lists are called bullet points. But the example I used happened to be a presentation I'd done about peace in the Middle East for a client. And so it kind of had, that was the double entendre, you know, peace also. But anyway, so I created a slide that didn't have any bullet points in it. And it was the best I could do. But the traumatic experience was the next month they published a letter to the editor saying how awful the slide was. And it was like, please give us better examples. It has no focus. And it was just a complaint letter that they did about my slides. And of course, I was mortified. It was very humiliating. And I decided that I needed to learn how to design slides. And so I started going to a summit, a workshop called Presentation Summit. Then it was called PowerPoint Live. It's changed its name. And I started really following designers and looking at what they did and just going through this whole process. And through that, I became a PowerPoint MVP as well. But being a PowerPoint MVP isn't about design, although some of the PowerPoint MVPs are designers, but some are programmers and some, you know, this and that. And what I do is basically show people how to communicate clearly and powerfully. So but through PowerPoint. So that's how I kind of came out of that humiliation and got to the point where people say, you know, you create great slides and all of that, but without being a designer.
Well, that was a very succinct story that had a lot of value. So I'm really, really glad that you shared it. One of the things is that you demonstrated how good can come out of some of our pain that we experience in life. And it's those kind of things that really often encourage us or move us forward to the next thing that we're supposed to share to our message. And this has become a big piece of your message. And that reminded me, the other thing that I'd forgotten earlier was that I'm going on the assumption that everybody knows what PowerPoint means. And even if you don't, hopefully by now, just from hearing the conversation, you understand that it's about slides. I use a Mac, and so I think it's Keynote is the similar thing to PowerPoint. I would imagine it's the same whatever system you use. And I don't know what other systems there are besides Keynote and PowerPoint. But there are other ways to just create slides. Is there something different about PowerPoint?
It's just the one that's used most often. So, but Google has something called Slides. So on, as part of Google Docs, they have a word, like a kind of thing, like a word processing thing, and they have a spreadsheet thing, but they also have a slide thing. So that's a free option that people can use. PowerPoint is very powerful, and it has a lot of features, and it was kind of there early on. And so it is used more than anything else. That's all.
And it's almost a generic term now, PowerPoint, that it's such a powerful thing. And it kind of goes back to that whole thing about a picture is worth 1,000 words. So here we are in the slides. You're being able to combine the actual words with the pictures together. But I'll let you share kind of the value of it. I can just see that in our conversation. But if you tell us so that we have it, what are the 3 big mistakes that people make with their slides?
I would say the first one is just putting the text, and the biggest one is putting the text on your slide that you're going to say and reading from it. In other words, using it like a teleprompter. So everybody who's hearing this has seen presentations like that, where basically there's a list of bullets and the presenter more or less reads them. And so there are a lot of things that are wrong with this, but one of the main things that people don't realize is that our brain can't listen and read very well at the same time. So there's some research based on that. And so what happens is when you as a presenter put up a slide like that, your audience sees the slide, and so they start reading. And because they can't really listen to you at the same time, and because they can read a lot faster than you can speak, they read ahead of what you're saying. And so they just read through the whole slide, not listening to you. They're not hearing anything you're saying, really, just little bits and pieces that kind of make it through into the brain. Mm-hmm. And when they finish reading, they turn their attention back to you, and they hear you speaking about stuff they already read because you're still going on. So they go, oh, well, I already read that. So they turn their attention away from you a second time. It's very counterproductive. In addition, in survey after survey, audiences say this is the thing they hate most about presentations, is somebody getting up and reading the slides. It's very annoying to people. So I would say that basically that is mistake number 1. I would say that the second mistake is just not using images. It's kind of the side effect, or the side effect of putting too much text on the slide, is that you don't have room for images. And we all know this, really, that images are very powerful. There's a huge amount of research about this, but just from your own experience of looking at commercials on TV, and you see how professional marketers use images and movement and all of that to attract your attention, but also to evoke emotion. And you've probably also heard, if you've read something about marketing, that people make decisions based on emotion. It's very hard to convey that just with text. And images, especially pictures of people, really do that very, very well. And so that's the second big mistake, is not visualizing your concepts. And it doesn't have to be photographs of people. It could even be a graph, because that might, if you're talking about certain data, that's the way you might want to visualize it, but some way of making it visually clear. And I guess I would say that the third mistake, especially in webinars, is to not use enough slides. So when you're speaking live, people see you on the stage there, you're up front there, people see you, and so that attracts their attention. So it's okay to leave a slide up on the screen for a while, because they'll put their attention on you as long as you're not reading the slide. You can go riff off on something else or just talk, and people will listen to you. After all, you don't have to speak with slides at all, and you should be able to hold people's attention even without slides. But in a webinar situation, especially when there are only slides or the webcam is really small, it's very easy. First of all, it's a little embarrassing to go off and do something else when you're in the audience, and the presenter can see you do that, to go down and start looking at your email when you're in the room. So they're less likely to do that. But when you're in your own home and watching a webinar, nobody knows what you're doing. So because the person isn't there, it's easier to get distracted. So in a webinar situation, you need more slides and livelier slides than you do in a live situation. So that's a third mistake that people make, is just not using enough slides. And there's a really easy way to do that. If you have a slide where you have a list of 4 things, just make that into 4 slides and put one thing on each slide and visualize each concept, and then it moves a lot more quickly.
So how many slides do you think you should have? Like, is there a one slide every 2 or 3 minutes kind of a thing, or if it's is there a scale to?
On a webinar, I like to have more than that. You know, every 1 or 2 minutes, something like that. There are other things that you can do. You could use a certain amount of animation, as long as it's, I don't recommend text animation because it just makes it annoying for people to read the text. People don't like to watch the text fly on the screen and have to wait till it gets there before they can read it. So, but you can do some very nice animation with images, for example, fading one image to another to show transformation. That's a nice thing that you can do. So sometimes I have one slide where I talk about turning death by PowerPoint into life by PowerPoint. And so I have a picture of a slide, and on one slide it shows a dead tree, and then it fades out into a live tree. And so that shows the transformation from death by PowerPoint to life by PowerPoint. It's elegant, it doesn't move all over the place, but yet it attracts people's interest. And I had another one where I did something similar of changing your presentations from boring to memorable. And I started with a black and white flower, and then I faded that out and faded in a brilliant, bright orange flower. So again, nothing really is moving that much, but there's some change. So in some way, you need to keep people engaged pretty often, every 1 or 2 minutes. It depends on your topic and your audience. If your topic's more technical, you might be on a chart that has a lot of information on it, and I do recommend making charts as simple as possible, but you might discuss that for 5 or 10 minutes, and especially if you're in a group situation where people are asking questions about the chart. So there are a lot of variables.
So going back to the number 2 about not using images or not using enough images, based off of one of using slides as a teleprompter and having too much text. So you said you could just take one bullet and create a new slide for each of those. I'm wondering, the balance between the words and the images, do you have just images? It sounds like there are some times where you can have just an image.
You could. The most typical layout is to have a title of the slide and then an image. Okay. And that image can cover the entire slide or most of the slide. I recommend making images big, covering it to the edges of the slide. And that text could be one of your bullet points. And the key is to, I teach something called the tell and show method. And what it is the text tells it, and then you show what you've told. So, and it's based on some research as well that showed that when students saw presentations like this, they understood it and remembered it better. And so one of the tricks is to make your slide titles actually say something. So instead of Internet Marketing 101, you might say something like, you can change the world with your online internet business, or something that's going to interest people. Or, in a business situation, you might say, instead of third quarter sales, you might say third quarter sales were up 5%. Do you see how that changes it to a statement? Mm-hmm. And so then people instantly read that and they immediately know the point of that slide. You just make it really easy for people to understand what you're saying. And then you might have that chart, or you might have an image, or whatever it is.
And you're saying that you want to have the image large, and the title being up at top. Does it need
usually
a certain size for what is the size ratio for the text itself?
Well, there are usually defaults for each theme or template in both PowerPoint and Keynote, and they're usually okay. You can change them one or the other. You want to make sure that the text is easily readable by people. And when people are looking on a computer screen in a webinar, the text could be a little bit smaller because they're close to their screen. If you're speaking live in an audience and there are people in the back of the room, then you need to make sure that those people in the back of the room can read the text. So it depends. It's not so much that there's a size ratio. You just want everything to be easy for people to read and understand quickly. Images being big just gives them more impact. So if you take a same image and make it a little teeny thing on the slide, and then you make it big on the slide, it will have much more impact.
Sure.
People notice it more.
And like you said, so there's a default setting in PowerPoint and on Keynote, probably the same thing with slides for Google. So that's all set. That's not a big issue, right?
Yeah, exactly. They're in PowerPoint at least, and I think in Keynote also, and probably in Google Slides, there are also layouts. So one layout is title and content, and another layout is title only. And I like the title only one a lot because that lets me put in my title and then I can just add my image.
Beautiful. Well, it's funny because I jumped right into the big mistakes because I wanted to hear which ones I was making, and I know that I've done all three of those. I probably could have started off really talking more about the benefits of slides. We talked a little bit about being able to do presentations, so webinars, being able to travel around and do those. And what other ways do you think it is that webinars directly affect the success of an entrepreneur, other than just being able to travel and have flexibility?
Oh, well, you could just reach a lot more people. So you mentioned that outstanding presentations workshop that I've done. And the first year we got 1,700 people, and it was a bunch of countries, but I didn't know how many. So the next year I actually, in the registration, asked people what country they were from. And we got 3,000 people from 97 countries. So that's half the countries in the world pretty much. And that's an amazing thing. It's really hard to do that. And you could do that, I mean, online, not only with webinars, you can do that with any blog. You can reach people online. In the last few months, I've had emails from people or comments from people on my blog from South Sudan, which is the newest country in the world, and then recently this week from Sudan. And it's so amazing because this guy from Sudan, he found he needed to do a presentation, and he found a blog post about it, and he decided to write me, and he asked me if I'd ever heard of Sudan. And he said that he had just graduated with a computer science degree, and he had gotten a job with an IT company. They asked him to do a presentation. That was how he ended up on my website. And so, of course, I wrote him back, and I said, of course, I've heard of Sudan, but we always hear bad news about Sudan. We never hear about people graduating with computer science degrees and getting jobs in IT companies. And so he wrote me back and he said, well, he's in Khartoum, and, there are things that are bad going on in different places, but in Khartoum, there's some normal life and everything. And it's so amazing to hear that. And that's very heartwarming. Now, on the other hand, I recently sent out an email promoting an ebook, and I got a letter back from somebody in Syria. Now, that wasn't such good news. And this guy I mentioned that I wrote books on AutoCAD, I think. My first books were on AutoCAD. And so this guy is a structural engineer, and he works for architects when they're building buildings. I can imagine in Syria, there's going to be a lot of rebuilding needing to be done. But the message that he said was not positive. I don't have to say exactly what it is, but I just wrote him back and I said, Mohammed, all I can say is that I wish you and your country peace. And he wrote me back and said, thank you for your kind thoughts. And so even though that news was bad, I could affect somebody in Syria that way and, try to be a little encouraging and, make them feel a little bit better. So when we work online, we can reach people from all over the world, and webinars is just so striking that way, how you can reach people anywhere. And as we mentioned, it gives the flexibility for the viewer. And so I get people, I'll do something at a specific time, but I get people from, 12 hours difference time zone watching the recording and responding as well. So it's an amazing way to reach the whole world. I just don't think there's anything like it. I think it's really revolutionary.
And you had mentioned earlier about the webinar being like the printing press. And it really is. I mean, we're in a global society now. And as messengers, we need to realize that some of the people that we need to get our message to aren't in our backyard. They're not in our neighborhoods. And so that's a very inspiring story, and it also really speaks to getting your message out there in a much bigger way. So that's very powerful. Well, I realize that we're already the half hour just flies by so quick. I want to make sure that we can kind of get an example of your slides. You were going to do a screen share. Do you want to share a little bit about what a good slide looks like and what a bad slide looks like?
Actually, that's not what I wanted to do. And I was just looking at my slides and I go, oh my gosh, I don't know if my slides are a good example of what I'm talking about. But these are examples of slides that share a lot of technical information. And so I'll just share them and you can see. And they are about webinars. So here's the first one. And so this is a good example of a first slide where you have your name and your title and your that kind of thing, and a logo at the top, but some image that helps engage people to the concept of doing webinars and speaking, which is what those images are there for. Mm-hmm. So that was what this was. And so this doesn't have any images on it at all because it's a diagram, and a diagram is one way of visualizing something. So I could have done this with a list of bullets, but this way it makes it much more visual, that you can see the order of things to do. And so in this case, I'm showing about how you prepare for a webinar. You start by setting the date and time. You choose a webinar service if you don't have one already. You decide on the free content you're going to give people. You write a script. You set up a marketing strategy and a schedule. You create slides. You practice. You get on early, that kind of thing. So it's just an example of one way of visualizing some text when it's not always in photos, that you want to use, especially in something that's kind of technical. Right. So, and here's another example. I don't know if you can see in the background, there's this arrow, but again, it's a process. So I'm talking about the concept of writing a sales page before you create a product, because it helps you to structure your product. And I'm talking about a product that you would sell on a webinar, and it ensures that your product has great benefits, and then it helps you promote your webinar because you know exactly what you're going to be saying or what you're going to be selling in the webinar. And
even if it's not a sales seminar, I think having the end in mind, creating it with the end in mind, whatever that call to action is, that makes a lot of sense.
Right. So this is another diagram, a step-by-step guide to promoting your webinar. And this is something that's very important for a successful webinar, whether you're selling something or not, because you obviously want people to register for the webinar. And so you really need to plan it in advance, ideally 2 months in advance. You need to create a sales page for the webinar and your product if you're selling a product. Write some emails in advance to promote it. Invite others to promote for you. Partnering with people is one of the most powerful ways to get people onto your webinar. And when they register, they end up on your mailing list as well. And then you promote it on social media. And there are other ways, promote on your Facebook and LinkedIn updates, and then send out the email. So it's just a blueprint, a simple structure for promoting your webinar. So here I actually have some bullet points, but I'm still trying to show two different. This is something that trips up a lot of people, kind of technical, about how to register people for your webinar. And a lot of webinar services. Do you use Webinar Jam, Mark?
I don't yet. I'm going to be switching that. I mean, I'm on Google Hangout right now. If I had Webinar Jam, I would have done it that way.
Right. So Webinar Jam is a webinar. I don't know if you call it a plugin, but it's like an add-on that goes on top of Google Hangouts on Air and gives you, for example, the option for people to register, so on like that. And so the one on the right is how many people you do it. You could do this with GoToWebinar as well, that you use their registration service. And so you don't have to create a unique opt-in form on your website, and you just take the list that they have and then you export it into your email program. And on the other hand, you can also register people on your own website with an opt-in form. So there's some advantages to this. One is branding. It's one step for people. In other words, they go to the page where you're trying to convince people to sign up, and they just sign up right there on that page, as opposed to clicking a button and going to the webinar page and then signing up there. And the autoresponder gives, then you use an autoresponder. So when you use the webinar service, Jam does this as well. It provides you the ability to set up emails that remind people. So when you do it on your own, you have to use autoresponders to give them the login link and remind them. An advantage is that you always have the latest list. And another big advantage is that you can capture affiliate links if you're working with affiliate links, because those people come to your website. And so those are captured, which they wouldn't necessarily be as easily if you use the webinars service.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, and so I wanted to invite people to sign up for a free, I think it's about 25 minutes. I was just looking at it yesterday. It's a video training similar to what I just showed you. It was a webinar that I did and that I recorded, and I sometimes say profit with webinars or webinars for profit, but it's some training that has some specific information I think you'll find valuable about creating and planning and promoting and delivering webinars. And you can get there by going ellenhelps.me/inspired. Now, I do want to say that this is my regular opt-in, so you're going to get a lot of other stuff as well. You're going to get a PDF called 13 Steps to Create a Successful Online Business, and 3 other videos about, one about creating and writing an ebook, creating and selling an ebook, one about growing a list, and the other one about working on your website, creating a website that converts. I don't remember the exact name of it. So, yeah, so you'll get all of that stuff.
That they get a whole bunch of extra bonuses on top of it.
Yeah, I guess so.
So
okay,
yeah,
so
if they go again, I just want to repeat that for anybody who's just listening and not perhaps watching for any reason. If you go to Ellen, ELLEN, helps.me/inspired, you can download all those free gifts in one shot.
Right. So I'm going to stop sharing now. I'll come back to that. And maybe I can put it in the chat as well, yes?
Yeah, and if anybody else has any questions, feel free to go ahead and put them in the chat. Really, this is a great introduction to understand a little bit more about what you're doing and why you're doing it, and how you can help people. I highly encourage everyone to go to that link in ellenhelps.me/inspired. Take a look at the full training and take notes. Make sure you have your notebook. Certainly implement some of these things. And if you're looking to do a webinar soon, or you want to see how you can make more money with webinars, I highly encourage you, of course, to reach out to Ellen directly and see what other support you might need.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Yep. So again, if you've got any questions, we'll go ahead and share those if you want to post them in the chat box. Otherwise, is there any last words that you would like to share, Ellen, before we say goodbye?
I just think that it's really hard to reach as many people as you need to reach without doing webinars. I think that webinars, I do know one successful marketer who doesn't use them, but in general, most people use webinars because it's so engaging. You can reach so many people, large numbers of people. You can inspire them, you can sell to them, you can train them, you can use it for so many different types of purposes. And I encourage you to, if you're not already incorporating webinars, to do so. It can start off by being scary. There's a lot to kind of organize, but after you do 1 or 2, it's really not that difficult. And some people, in fact, you were talking about being afraid of speaking, but there are certainly people who feel more comfortable doing webinars than speaking in person, and that it really helps that issue, especially if they don't use the webcam. And I encourage you to use the webcam so people can see you. It's how they know they can really get to know you and learn to like you and trust you, so important for marketing. But you don't have to do that. And so it is something that's even people who are introverted and shy can use to reach so many people. So I encourage you to take advantage of it.
Absolutely. And like you said, there's a lot of different platforms. You could just do a Google Hangout just like this and a screen share. I know you've got a whole list of different webinar platforms that people can get from you. But really, it's just about encouraging them to stand up and make that a part of their marketing plan, and implementing some of the steps that you're going to share with them in the free resources. But just start doing it. I love that you're just encouraging people to make it a part of their marketing plan.
And if anybody has some questions, just go to changetheworldmarketing.com and click the contact link and say, I heard you on Mark Porteous's Inspired Messengers Network, and I have a question. I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Ellen. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate what you're doing to help inspired messengers and what I call purpose-driven entrepreneurs to make a big difference in the world and to make more income, because I think that's a big part of it, is that we want to be able to we need to be able to have full bellies if we want to live in our hearts. So thank you very much. I appreciate that, and I appreciate our connection. So thank you.
So do I, Mark.
I also want to thank everyone here who is watching, whether you're watching us live or on the replay. I truly appreciate you giving yourself this time and investing in yourself, working towards sharing your mission in a bigger way. I believe that we're all spiritual messengers, and that includes you. No matter how you might feel about what your message is, or you might be unclear, there's a message in your story, and we would love to help you get it out. So if you are inspired to share your message, we're here to support you. Again, you can learn more at theinspiredmessengersnetwork.com and access valuable resources there to help you and your mission. Again, just want to thank you for being here. We would love to read and respond to your thoughts. You can also post those right below in the comments, and I'll make sure that Ellen gets all of those as well. Remember that you are a brilliant light in the world. Keep shining brightly. Namaste.